What is a brain healthy organisation?
It's a great question. It's an organisation that looks after its people and focuses on having everyone working at their optimal level all of the time by giving them time off, giving them time to focus, giving them time to get into the zone so that they can actually be productive. I mean, one of the biggest problems in most organisations today is that everyone's busy, but no one's actually getting anything done. And we know that less people today are less productive than they were 15 years ago because of all these extra demands on their time and the expectation that they're always online and they're always checking email and they're always checking Teams or whatever apps you're using to actually keep the whole team working together and so on. And all of those things are disrupting their time and slowing them down and actually affecting their productivity. And so a brain healthy organisation is one that looks after its employees. And the most important aspect of any organisation, of course, is the brains of its employees. So keeping those healthy and having an environment where everybody's connected, everyone feels as though they're part of the organisation. Everyone wants the organisation to succeed because they know what the driving forces within the organisation are and they know where the organisation is going and they feel as though they can be part of that is a brain healthy organisation. But it's an organisation that at the same time allows its employees to have time off and allows its employees to de-stress and relax at night and on weekends as well, because we know that people are more productive when we do that as well.
I remember many years ago, I worked with Emirates Airline and I was co-leading a team of 17,500 people. And we were welcoming the customers on the aircraft, and I walked through the economy cabin, and one of my crew was standing there looking at her fingernails, checking if she'd done the varnish right, checking if she'd filed them correctly. And I said, "Hey, what are you doing? Attention, please, on the customer." She said, "Daniel, I'm treating the customer like the company treats me." And I was thinking to myself, this is going to be an interesting flight because her perception is obviously different to mine. And my perception was that the company had rolled out the red carpet. I had the best accommodation on Sheikh Zayed Road. They paid for electricity, they paid for water, they paid for transport every day. They washed my uniform, and every time I went to a foreign land, they put me in a five-star hotel and gave me a handful of cash. And I thought, that's how I'm going to treat the customers. But obviously, there's a difference in perception here. And she was seeing something different. So if I was working in an organisation, how do I know the organisation that I'm in is brain healthy?
I think one of the easiest ways is turnover. Staff will leave if they're not feeling loved in the organisation. I think we need to love our employees. And organisations with high turnover really can't be brain healthy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have that high turnover. And high turnover is extremely expensive, as you know. You've got all the onboarding and hiring, get to going through the whole process of hiring new staff and retraining and all those things. So having an organisation which has really, really low turnover is a really easy way of knowing that you've got an organisation that is brain healthy, because a brain healthy organisation is one that's going to have people who are happy to be there because they're constantly learning, but they also feel as though they're part of the discussion around where the organisation's going, how things are going, and they have a belief in where the organisation is going and how it's actually moving forward. And I work a lot with this at the Institute for Sustainable Leadership, and they talk about the difference between a honeybee organisation and a locust organisation. And again, a honeybee organisation is one that doesn't have a lot of turnover. And they work with a lot of organisations in Europe where these organisations have been going for 100 years, 150 years, 200 years. And they've got employees that are there that are third generation, fourth generation, fifth generation, because the whole family loves the organisation. And the kids grow up seeing how much their parents enjoy working there, and then they actually want to work there because of the fact that it is a great place to work and it's part of the community and it's part of that. So having an organisation where people are happy to come along, everyone's actually happy when they're there, people get along, but also people want to stay there rather than leaving. And the sad thing is, what is it, 3 years is average now or something ridiculous like that people actually stay at an organisation. If you're one of those organisations, then you do have a problem, and you need to actually think about how you can actually change that so that you can be more sustainable. Because as I said, it's expensive having people come and go, but it also means that you're not getting the best out of all those employees. They're not going to contribute to the long-term success of your organisation if they're just looking at where am I going to go next.
How do you define love? Because I've seen love in some organisations, and that's led to some wandering hands and some sly kisses at parties. How do you define that love from a company to the employees, or from the leaders to the employees? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I think there's a big difference between sexual attraction and love. And I think people can love each other and not be sexually attracted to each other. And you don't want that sexual attraction because, of course, that's just going to interfere with all sorts of things. Plus, there's going to be all sorts of legal ramifications for that. Whereas I think when I talk about love, and love for the company, or love for the people that you actually work for, it's definitely that connection that we have when we actually appreciate the other person and we want what's best for them as well as what's best for us. And of course, our brains are set up so that we actually get a huge amount of benefit from actually helping other people. So our default is actually to be helpful. Our default is to collaborate, be helpful, to actually contribute to other people's well-being. And so when you get an organisation that's all about that and everyone's working towards that, the output and the success within that organisation just goes through the roof, because you've got all these people who are actually collaborating with each other and all these ideas are flowing, and each time you get two or three people actually collaborating, you get an interaction going on there that actually means that your innovation and creativity goes through the roof, and they notice things. And also, you want people on the floor, you want the people who are doing the really hard work on the floor every day to be willing not only to put in 100%, but also to notice when things aren't working and to be willing to put up their hand and say, hey, this isn't working, but we could do it this way, we could do it that way, and it'll actually be more successful. Because most people who are leaders or CEOs or whatever, they're not on the floor every day. They don't see where the problems actually are, and it's really hard to see from the top what's actually happening at the bottom. Like your example, right? You are leading that team, but you didn't notice that the people within the team at the next level down weren't enjoying what they're actually doing. So having a situation where those people feel as though I want to put up my hand and say, hey, let's fix this. I can fix it by doing this. Or have you thought about so-and-so? They're not doing too well at the moment. Maybe we could shift them somewhere else or whatever. That's the sort of organisation you want, because that's going to be a really successful organisation. Rather than having people feel as though I'm just here to earn a buck and then I'm going to go home and forget about it. But rather be, I want to make this place hum so that we're all happy.
And from my perspective, we can see that from inside the organisation. If I'm working in the organisation and I've got my finger on the pulse, or I've got a little bit of sensory acuity, I can probably pick this up. But if I'm in the job market and if I'm looking for a new place to call home, how do I do that as an outsider? What are the questions that I should be asking? When I'm talking to the company, what interview questions should I be asking them, so they prove to me that their organisation is brain healthy?
Yeah, great question. I mean, number one, you can look at their turnover, right? Most organisations will actually have turnover or some metric of that available on the internet that you can actually look at and see whether or not the turnover is high or not, or how quick the turnover is. And some organisations' turnover will be different in different departments. So looking at that and whether or not you're going to be in one of those departments is a great idea. The other thing is ask them about who they see their stakeholders being. Because an organisation, honeybee organisation, will see the stakeholders as everyone except their shareholders. So they'll actually see the stakeholders as the employees. They'll see the stakeholders as local community. They'll see the stakeholders as the suppliers. They'll see the stakeholders as the customers. They'll also see the stakeholders as the families that are involved in that organisation, because all those people are impacted by the organisation, how the organisation is running. If their answer is that their stakeholders and their focus is the shareholders, then run. And run really quickly, because then it's just about profits, right? That's all they're going to worry about. Whereas if they turn around and say, oh, these are all our different stakeholders and we focus on all of them and we feel it's important, then you're in an organisation that's going to be caring about the employees and it's going to be caring about where they're getting their stock from and how they're running the organisation and improving the organisation as a whole, rather than just focusing on that one metric, which is profit. And those are the organisations that actually do better, and do better during recessions, do better during downturns in the economy and all those things, because of the fact that their employees are willing to stick around, and their employees are willing to support them, and their suppliers are willing to support them, and so on, because of the fact that they've always looked after all of the stakeholders involved.
With brain health, where does this appear? Does brain health appear on the profit and the loss statement? Do we put it in the asset, or do we put it in the liability column? Where does it appear on the profit and loss statement?
I think it depends on whether or not you're a honeybee or a locust organisation. I think if you're a locust organisation, if you're not looking after the brain health of your employees, it's definitely a liability, because you're going to have more sick leave. You're going to have people who are coming to work and slacking off, who don't really care what they're actually doing. You're going to have employees who are going to be doing everything they can to get out of, doing too much work, or doing any overtime, or doing any, and so it's definitely a liability if you're not looking after the brains of your employees. If you are looking after the brain, then it's definitely on the good side of that profit and loss sheet, right? Because they're going to be contributing far more than they would otherwise, and so therefore it really is a bonus. And we know the more money you put into looking after your employees, the ramifications for your profit goes up significantly. Having more diverse employees, within your organisation, your profit and loss, your profit goes up within an organisation. Having employees who care about everyone they're working with, it ends up getting better profits and so on. So it's definitely a bonus if you're looking after their brains. But if you're not looking after their brains, then it's going to cost you money, because there's going to be more sick leave, there's going to be mental health issues, you're going to have people suing you because of all those issues that come up, and so definitely it depends on how you're treating this and how you're responding to the brains of everybody within your organisation, and your own brain, of course. If you're a leader, you should be looking after your own brain, which is really important.
If I was a leader in an organisation and I wanted to have a couple of quick wins and to help my team to improve their brain health, what would be a couple of things that I could do starting today, and I wouldn't need permission from upper management, or I wouldn't need to request a budget for training? What would be a couple of quick wins?
Easy ones are get all your employees to turn off all their notifications on their phones. It's free. It's easy to do. You turn off all your notifications on your phone, and your mental health improves within 2 weeks. And so all of your employees are actually going to benefit from just turning off all their notifications on their phone and on their laptop and everything else. So that's a real easy win. The other one, which I talk to a lot of leaders about, is communication, and actually stopping when you communicate with people, actually having periods of time where there's no conversation going on, which is something that leaders struggle with, because a lot of leaders will get someone into their office, or go and see someone because they've got something they've got to tell them, or they've got to teach them something or whatever, which means that they actually go into that conversation with, this is what I've got to tell them, and then I'll get out of here. But rather than doing that, going and speaking to your employees with the mindset of, I'm going to give them space and time, and so ask them, how are you going? Ask them what's going on. But when they speak to you, as soon as they finish whatever they're saying, have a gap before you actually respond. Because at the moment, and I listen to I've done a lot of research on how people communicate these days, and there's no gaps. We used to have gaps after people used to speak, because during that gap, what you're doing as a listener is you're processing the information, because it takes time to process the information, and then you're deciding how to respond to what you just heard. But if there's no gap, what you're doing is you've already got in your head what you want to tell them, and so therefore you're just telling them what you want to tell them, and they know that. They know he hasn't listened, or she hasn't listened to me. They're just responding in what they actually want from me, rather than actually caring about me as an individual. So simply having those gaps whenever you're talking to someone, especially one-on-one, will allow, they will believe that you actually care about what they're saying, you're listening to what they're saying, and then you're responding to what they're saying. So just have a gap. Makes a huge difference in communication, and you actually connect much more closely with the people within your that you're actually working with. So they're two really simple ways you can actually change things. The other really important thing is face-to-face communication. Actually sitting down with someone and chatting to them face-to-face is actually better for your mental health than anything else you can do, and it's better for your brain health than anything else you can do. So giving your employees time to have lunch, but have lunch away from their desk where they're actually sitting together chatting, is really, really important. I worked with one organisation, and their tea room was tiny and wasn't very well set up. So we revamped the tea room, and this is probably going to cost money if you don't have a good tea room. But we revamped it. They bought a table tennis table. They bought a fuse board table. They had M&Ms and stuff there for free. They got a good coffee machine in there. They told employees that you've got to have your 45 minutes off, and it's got to be away from your desk, and here's a beautiful spot you can all sit and do it. And a lot of the employees now hang around after work and play table tennis with each other, play fuse balls with each other, right? They're actually getting along now, whereas they weren't before. And this is a call centre. This isn't somewhere that you would normally think of people actually wanting to stay after work to hang out. So doing something simple like that, I mean, all right, you're going to have to spend a little bit of money, but you might already have a nice area, but you're not actually forcing your employees to actually use it, or telling them you've got to take your 45 minutes. You can't just eat your lunch at your desk while you're looking at your phone or whatever it happens to be. And also making that area a phone-free area, right? That's a device-free area. So when you're in there, you don't have your devices, you don't have any of that stuff. So you're actually talking to your employees, and they all get to know each other, and all of a sudden they realise they've got things in common, and they can actually talk about stuff, and talk about their families, and talk about their kids, and talk about they play soccer at night, or whatever it happens to be that they enjoy doing. And then it makes a huge difference, because then if they're expected to collaborate with each other, or if they've got a problem, they're happy to go and talk to someone else who they know, hey, he's having trouble with his daughter. I'll go and have a chat to him about his daughter, and then ask him if he can help me with this, and they're more willing to do that because they actually get along and they actually want to help each other. So yeah, having an area where they can get together and spend time is really, really important, face to face. And we've lost that in a lot of organisations. A lot of organisations I go into, the tea rooms are just not utilised at all, or they're all sitting there on their phones for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and then they rush back to work and don't actually talk to each other.
The flip side of hiring is firing, and the sexy name we call it these days is de-hiring. And I do hear a lot of complaints of people who have been let go that they lost their dignity during that process of the de-hire. What does a brain healthy organisation do differently in the de-hiring process?
They don't de-hire. They retrain, or they do swaps. So there's a lot of great honeybee organisations in Europe where they'll have relationships with several organisations, and they'll actually swap employees. So the employee goes to another organisation to actually learn about what's going on there and how they're running things there, and then comes back with this new knowledge. Now, we all want to be productive. We all want to contribute to society. We all want to be part of something that's really important. So whenever you get an employee who's getting to that point where things, they're getting bored with what they're doing, or they've been extended beyond their abilities. That's what usually happens is we keep upping the goalposts, right? We keep promoting them to a point where they're now incompetent, right? And then we go, oh, they're now incompetent, so we've got to get rid of them. But rather than doing that, keep them down at a lower level where they're actually happy doing what they're doing, but give them more money, actually pay them more, but pay them more because then they're actually leading that area or leading that group. Some great organisations will not take people off the factory floor, or not take people off out of the engineering department into leadership positions who are really good at that, because they create positions for them where they're actually training everybody else in that position or whatever, because they're really good at that, but they know they're not actually going to be good as a manager, or they know they're not going to be good as a leader, because we're not all good at those other jobs, but we usually get promoted to those jobs, and then that's when we sort of hit the ceiling, and we do promote people beyond their abilities rather than leaving them down at a level where they're at their abilities, and then pay them more because they're more valuable, because they're really good at whatever it is that they happen to be doing. So I would say, when we talk about a honeybee organisation, it's an organisation that looks at all its employees as part of the hive, and therefore it's not it's not an option to get rid of them. We need to work out how we can use what they've got. And if they've been there for a number of years, then they've probably got a lot of worthwhile things. It's just you've put them in the wrong position, and you've got to rethink that and put them in the right position.
And if it did get to that situation where they did have to let somebody go, what would be a couple of things that the employer who had a healthy brain could do to soften that impact? Because from my understanding, a lot of people live hand to mouth. They've got enough money in the bank to survive just until the next paycheck. I met an executive recently earning a great salary, but the burn rate was 5 days. And I said, how does that work? She said, Daniel, I get paid on a Friday. I run out of money by Wednesday. And so from her perspective, if she was going to let go, her greatest fear was that she'd lose the financial stability. So what could a brain healthy leader do in this aspect? A couple of things just to soften that blow for them.
Yeah, that's a hard one because, I mean, that's... Yeah, I mean, having the conversation before it actually happens so that the person knows it's going to happen. Again, having that connection with everybody where you actually relate to them and you understand who they are and who their families are and all of those sort of things, so that you can have those honest conversations with them that, you know, this is happening and we're going to have to do something about it, and let's, you know, we're going to revisit it in a month's time or whatever it happens to be. You know, giving them time to adjust to that situation, because it often is a big adjustment for them, and giving them the time to reevaluate their future. But it's always going to be pretty ugly. I mean, letting anyone go is going to be hard, and if they're living week to week, then that's going to be really hard. But I think anybody who is living week to week needs to reevaluate, needs to read something like The Barefoot Investor and actually start getting their finances into shape, because none of us should be doing that. We all should be putting something aside so that we're not in that situation. Those would be my two things. If you're in a honeybee organisation, if you're in an organisation that's looking after the brains of their employees, then you shouldn't get to the point where you need to let people go. And if you do need to let people go, then it should be quite obvious that was going to happen anyway, through the interactions that are actually going on, because you're going to be having honest interactions with everybody around, and everybody within the organisation is going to be having honest interactions. And if there's a particular individual who sticks out, they're going to realise that they stick out as an outlier who's not actually happy where they are, and therefore things are going to happen negatively. But usually it would only happen if there was something actually really negative that had happened, and for legal reasons they've got to go.
I love that example there of the honeybee organisation, and in my mind I can see the connection between a football club. A football club has their A team, and they've got their bench warmers, and then they have their reserve grades, and then they're bringing up all the way up from the juniors and the smaller academies. And I think there's a lot of opportunities here where football clubs do take them out of the A grade and put them back into the B grade to go and learn the basics again. And they just substitute, they move them around on the team, move them into a different position. I think that's great. And the other thing you mentioned there was having relationships with other organisations. And I've seen really good people go to an environment that wasn't right for them. The problem wasn't their knowledge, the problem wasn't their skill, the problem was not their attitude. It was just the environment of that organisation that wasn't right for them. Now, I think for a brain healthy organisation, if they could substitute one of their players and simply move the location, the environment, it could do them the world of good. Because you often see it, somebody gets fired or de-hired and they go to another organisation and make a couple of $1 million. The leader goes, what happened there?
What happened there? Yeah. Plus, and also, you're creating bad blood too within, you're within the whole industry, right? And you don't want that. You want to be known as the organisation which is brain healthy, so that all the great people want to come and work for you. But if you've sacked people who have gone to other organisations and then they've done well there, they're going to probably badmouth your organisation, so you're going to get a bad name. And this person, everyone else is going to be, this person's really successful, why did they get rid of them? Nobody should go and work with them. So you need to be careful of your own reputation when you do if you get to that point where you actually get rid of someone. Whereas, yeah, swapping people when everybody's on board is a great way to get around those issues, and you can end up with some great people who have been trained somewhere else, and now you've got them, and you've got all those benefits, and they've got the benefits of the people you've trained, and so on, and then you swap back later, and so on. Yeah, it's a great way to do it. There's some great organisations that do that.
You wrote the book, The Connected Species. What's the essence of the book, and where can we get a copy?
Yeah, so it's on the evolution of the human brain and how our brains have actually evolved to enable us to connect. So our brains, we're not the fastest species, we're not we don't have the largest brain of all the species, we're not the strongest of the species. We became the alpha species because of our connection, because we actually work together, and we work together really well. And in the 80s and 90s, there was this big push that we're all evil, and we all, greed is good and all of that nonsense. And that's not actually how our brains are set up. Our brains are actually set up to collaborate and to communicate and to help each other out and to empathise with each other, and that's how we've got to the point where we are now, through collaboration and through connection. And so that's what the book's about, and how we can connect better, how we can communicate better, how we can run organisations better, how we can run our own lives better in a brain healthy way, where we're all actually contributing and we're all thriving in those organisations. So and each chapter has some really easy tips, just like that. Have a little break in between one person talking to another, and turn off all your notifications. A whole bunch of every chapter has a nice little tip like that you can actually change the health of your brain really easily by doing all those little tips. And it's available, I've been told by the publishers, I've got to say, it's available at all bookshops, online, or at your local bookshop. You can ask for it because they said I'm not allowed to mention any particular Amazon or anything like that, so I'm not going to mention any of those big organisations. But yeah, anywhere online you can get it, and you should be able to ask for it at your bookshop as well. They should be able to get it in for you. But available online everywhere.